Every business leader would love to see their company grow. A lot of times that means adding on new employees. But how do you keep the culture as you add on these new employees? That culture that you had in the beginning when there was just a few of you and you had the fire, the passion, and that vision. What happens when you get over 100 employees or 200 employees? How do you keep that culture going? Well, I'm the perfect person to ask that question. Joe Chura, CEO of Dealer Inspire, only a few years ago had a small core group of people. Now he has over 800 employees. So we're going to talk to him to see how he keeps that culture going as his company continues to grow. Let's dive in. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of You're in Charge. Now what? I'm your host, Glenn Pasch. And the goal of this channel is to help those of you who find yourself in charge of a team, a division, a project, or even a business, build the skills necessary to lead high-performing teams. Each week, we're going to focus on one topic, either myself or, like today, we're going to have a guest, and we're going to focus on that topic so you get viewpoints from my guest as well in order to help you generate more skills so that you can generate consistent results and become more successful. So without further ado, my guest today is Joe Chura. I will let him introduce himself in a moment. He has a lot on his plate, handles a lot, but before we get started, I want you to know, and we've talked about this before, I have such as a ton of respect for you, but as a leader, how I've seen you evolve and grow, I think it's been just admirable because as much success as you've had, you've never lost sight of the team that you have around you and the importance of that. So I really appreciate you being here. And I want to just sort of pick your brain a little bit and have some fun talking about everything non-marketing. And so if you would just take 30 seconds and tell everybody who you are, and then we'll dive in.
Well, Glenn, thanks for having me. It's great to see you, and I'm sure this will be fun. My name is Joe Chura, as Glenn said. I'm the CEO of a company called Dealer Inspire. We started in 2013. We were a separate entity spun off of a digital marketing agency called Launch Digital Marketing, which was created in 2011. And Dealer Inspire primarily provides software solutions to auto dealers. So we have about 4,000 or so dealers. In 2013, we had 0. I had 3 employees at Dealer Inspire, probably 15 or 20 at launch. Today, we have over 650. In 2018, we were acquired by Cars.com, and I am still the CEO of Dealer Inspire, which is kind of acting like a division within Cars right now. Also on the executive team of Cars.com.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that was just a very exciting time because when I first met you, you were always someone who had a vision of growing, but you never lost sight of always just providing quality products, but also quality teams. I was always and continue to be impressed with the people you surround yourself with and the people on your team. So that's sort of what we want to get into because even as you were acquired, and that was great. And as I said, I was very happy for you and your team. It hasn't really changed you. I haven't really noticed, a change where someone would say, "Hey, my company was acquired, so I take my foot off the gas." And probably on the flip side, I've seen you accelerate, but you've become your focus continues to be very driven. But again, as I said, you surround yourself with people. So what I want to talk about with you today is that sort of growth going from a few people to as large as you are now. One of the traits that I've always heard and seen when I've visited your company is that energy culture. It's a word gets tossed around a lot. But talk to me about how that culture, energy, vision of what Dealer Inspire is today. Was it there in the beginning, or how did it evolve over time?
It's a good question. And right now we're in obviously completely unprecedented times. I hate even using that word because it's so used, but
Right.
it's true. And what I say of how we got here could be completely different of how someone listening to this can take their company to that next level, given
Right.
you might not be in person, you might not develop that culture the way I did then. So now
Right.
it's a different challenge. But how I did it back then is I read a lot of books, and I read Delivering Happiness as an example, and I understood that to build culture, it's really reliant on the team you surround yourself with. So when we were small, we created tenants, and those were inspired by Moz. You remember SEO Moz, which
Yeah.
turned into
Yep.
Moz.
Yep.
Rand Fishkin created these tenants, and I looked at those. I was like, wow, those are really good because they're like guiding principles to
Hmm.
always follow. And you can put things on the wall, and you can put a pool table in an office and call it cool. But if you don't really live it and really believe it, then it's bullshit, really,
Right.
for what it comes down to. And what I've seen, and as you've been in my office a few times, the skateboards on the wall aren't skateboards I bought because they're skateboards. They're skateboards because I ride skateboards.
Right.
They are there's guitars there because I play guitar. And as you start attracting people to your company, you feel like they're each an extension of your personality in a way, and all of a sudden those people attract other people, and you start building this culture of these very like awesome human beings that most of them also had like this side hustle
Right.
of doing something else and wanting to learn. And what I found is that the key here is you find people that really have a passion for what they do, and you ask them a very simple question, and that is, what do you like to do on your free time? And if it's related to the
Interesting.
job, if it's related to the job, I found that to be a really good key indicator. There's not a nothing that's 100%,
Right.
but you really find that it's like, hey, if they're passionate about SEO as an example, and on weekends they love to read about that, and they love to tinker with building websites and learn how to rank for certain keywords. I mean, this is the
Right.
way I thought back then, and I still do. Then it's a really good indicator they're probably going to be good at their job if they're an SEO specialist,
Right.
right?
Right. So did you, when you would look for people, so like you were saying, building that culture, and it was interesting. I was speaking with some other guests earlier on, and they all had that same thread. They were saying that one, you can't make it up. You have to live it. You have to exemplify it through your actions on a daily basis. To create a culture, it isn't just, hey, we want to be this, right? Like you say, I threw a ping pong table in because Google did, and now we all have that culture. It's living it. So as you were growing, right, you had your core people, like you said in the beginning, but as you added them on, was it, we'll use the instance of the person who is SEO and they like that. Was it also just skills, or was it their personality or work ethic, versus skills where maybe you thought I could teach skills, but I can't teach this? Was there certain traits that you looked for in part of your team?
Yeah, it came down to two things: willingness and knowledge.
Mm,
Knowledge you could teach. Willingness, you either have it or you don't, right?
right.
And that's what we kind of look for, and you have to look for. I mean, we pass over people that had the right skills, but their willingness wasn't necessarily there, just didn't feel right.
Right.
And there's again no perfect science, and I definitely got it wrong, but I've got it right more times than I got it wrong. And
Right.
there's no trick interview question. It's just this gut feeling that this person is going to be a good fit. And typically, early on, especially, it's easier because you get a lot of good referrals from people, and you
Right.
kind of know the background, or in many cases, like I remember the first 20 employees, I kind of knew in some regard they were maybe a circle or two away from my core circle of friends and family, but I still kind of knew them or knew of them.
Right.
And as that grows, you do have to start counting on other people to look at those guiding principles, those tenets, and trust them that they're hiring the right people. And by no means, again, is this an easy thing, and you're going to get it wrong.
Right.
You just have to learn, and we still do. I mean, there's no perfect science to this.
Yeah, we I have a lot of similar thoughts to what you do. Is I used to do almost all of the hiring. Got it wrong many times, dependent on, not trusting sometimes that gut feeling that, or you talk yourself into it. Um, but I used to always say the same thing. I cannot teach work ethic. I can teach you skills, but if you're not going to show up, and interviews sometimes are very awkward because everybody's on their best behavior and maybe we now have multiple people interviewing. And so by the time they're talking to me, they've gone through 4 or 5 people. And, I think we've done that same thing, learning from your mistakes, refining the process, and moving forward. So let's talk about this concept of going, because again, you accelerated pretty rapidly in terms of volume of size. So one of the keys, reasons why I built this, like I said, this sort of journey, is that I noticed so many times that people, when I would go in and work with dealerships or other businesses and go in and try to help them, you'd find that people got promoted into positions because they were good at one thing, but nobody ever taught them how to actually lead a team. So talk to me about that in your company. As you grew, you obviously had to start building these layers of responsibility in. Was it a conscious training to be able to say, okay, Joe, you're now in charge of this team of, account managers, let's say, you're above them. Like, how did you choose that person? And more importantly, how did you train them? And was that a conscious thing, or you just, again, got lucky certain times? Or, talk to me about that, because that scaling concept is very hard for companies.
Yeah, so it's almost like you read. I don't have this on my wall, but if I had to write the biggest opportunities we have in the company, it is management training,
Right.
and we still struggle with that to this day, and it's because we have very young managers.
Right.
We have people that it's their first time managing a person. It's their sorry, there's a little bit of a distraction. Is it loud on your end?
Absolutely, it's fine. Yeah, I can hear you good. It's
Okay.
good. Don't worry
All
about
right.
it. This
All
is
right.
all
Good.
easy.
No, no, no. There's someone vacuuming right outside my door, so I
Oh,
just wanted
that's
to
all
make
right.
sure it wasn't too
I've
loud.
had when I've gone this, all of a sudden I have the people cutting the grass right behind me. I'm going, oh, missed that today. That's what's fun about it. It's live. It's good.
Yeah. No. So I'll say the biggest opportunity, and I say that to not use the word weakness, is making sure these new supervisors and people that are managing other people are trained properly.
Right.
And how we did that early on is, it wasn't like, oh, so and so would be a great people manager. He or she would be really, um, they had this willingness to go beyond what they were doing,
Right.
and they had the knowledge to be able to train those people. And that's kind of really how it started. And then after a while, you start hiring people that had been managers, and that's key. So, when you first grow a business, there's no book. I always tell people that if there was,
Right.
it'd be, I would read it. I have 100 books in my office, and I have read books. Startup CEO. There's a bunch of startup books, but each business is so unique, and the personalities are so different that
Right.
a lot of it resides on your gut to say, hey, can this person manage this other person? Where it gets tricky is when you do grow and you have 100 plus employees, and you're not making the decision of, hey, should this person really be a supervisor? And do we have time to train this person and give them, in an ideal world, you'd give them like a month worth of management training, and they would
Right.
focus on that. Well, when you're growing at the clip we are, and we were, you don't have that luxury. So you're kind of learning under fire. And
Exactly.
again, that's where we made mistakes. But I also look at that as, hey, you know what? You're not perfect. And I think perfect kind of gets in the way of good
Right.
in many cases. And it allows someone the opportunity to really grow. It allows our people operations team to develop curriculum, which we are still today, to really hone in on those skills, so a person can become a better manager. But it's a huge area of opportunity in our organization.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's a lot, and you and I have talked about it as well. Before this, is that I think that that's a key for most companies, and especially rapidly growing companies. The key, in my opinion, is if you can identify the right person, then that'll get you half the way there. Right. And one of the guides I used to, when people would ask me, they'd say, okay, Glenn, I have a team of people. Who should I choose? My way that I would say, here's what's worked for me would be if Joe was the person who's managing the team, but Joe's now going to get promoted to go do something else. I have to replace Joe from this team. I'd say, okay, if Joe was on vacation and there was a problem, who on the team would people go to get a solution? And I said, that's probably your best person to think about because they're approachable, they have the knowledge, they're patient, they're willing to help and do it, right? All of those skills that a good leader. And if I can get somebody with those good skills, even if I don't have time or, as you said, devote as much time, they at least have the right skill sets or the right intention to try versus someone who may be the best performer, but they don't know how to communicate with that. So with that, though, I want to make sure, because the point of this also is I always say we're dropping tools in the people who are watching their toolbox to make them a better manager is as you grew, though, you said it a couple times, and I don't want to skim over it, is not just that you didn't have time, you got further away from those granular decisions. So there's two parts to this. One is trusting that person now to do that. But how did it, because I think it's the hardest thing for people who start the business and as it grows is to let go of it and trust them. Like, talk about that, because I think that if people could walk away from that, like letting go and trusting is really hard to do, especially if you were good at it and you had success
Yeah.
doing that. So talk about that.
So it was easy for me, and it was the point. I remember it clearly. I was in a group interview, and I just felt like I didn't add value like I normally
Mm,
do, because the team around me was adding so much value, and they were making their own decisions, and we had developed a great framework together.
right,
We created this thing that I call people analytics, where we would create questions, and again, there's no perfect science to this, but we would create questions. And we would test them on current employees, on top performers, on lower performers, and we would see how those performers would answer these set of questions to predict the success of folks that would be interviewing for a job.
right.
So we did that for like a year. And then all of a sudden, I'm just sitting in this interview, and I'm like, I'm not adding value here. And I felt like I didn't want to be there, to be honest
Right.
with you, because I wasn't adding value. So I'm like, I'm not important here. So that was the defining moment where I said, you guys take this over. That doesn't mean I'm not involved in anything, but to hire, when we were at 300 people, if I'm sitting in every interview, 300 to 400, I'm doing something wrong at that
Right.
point, because my responsibilities as a CEO, especially before I got acquired, was managing cash flow,
Right.
managing the vision of the business, managing my team, my culture of the team. And really, how I looked at this is I was like an orchestra conductor, and I would put these teams together. And when I found someone didn't play perfectly in tune, that didn't mean they were a bad fit. That just means maybe that we had to put them in another part of
Right.
the actual orchestra, right? And that happened a lot, and it still does. And you try to play off people's skills,
Hmm.
and many times it's not this like binary thing where, hey, this person works or doesn't work. It's like maybe they fit somewhere else, and we have so many stories of someone moving to another position and succeeding there.
Right.
And I look at that as that's on me, and that's on our company to make sure that we have the right fit for those people, because it would be ashamed if we had let them go, or they had departed because they were frustrated because they were in the wrong role.
And I love that analogy. And for everyone listening, again, we focus on different. We stop and we highlight, and that's a great highlight. Is that point of a leader, especially CEO, but it's you're always leading a team, right? So again, you have what you said, 800 people. You can't manage 800. You have a team of X. Let's say you have a 10 direct reports who then impact 50 people who impact that, and it tiers down. But I love that concept of orchestra leader. And I think what you just said also is one of the flaws of unsuccessful businesses is um, they don't take the time to say, I actually have a very good employee. Joe's dedicated. Joe comes to work. Joe tries every single day. Either, and it's happened to people in our team where the job just grew past them, but that doesn't make them a bad employee. Same thing in multiple businesses over the years. I've plug and played and moved people around, and all of a sudden they were struggling here. But I put them over here, and they far exceeded what I could have ever thought that position to be. So I think I'm always a believer in you don't let good employees go. You don't let good people go. You try to figure it out because good people, hardworking people, we go back to the beginning of the interview where you said that sense of work ethic and that sense of, effort, that's hard to find. So it shouldn't just be easily disposed because someone got frustrated. And I always say, I don't know if you do, but I think you would because you wouldn't be this successful. If someone's struggling, I always go first of, have I done enough? Have I given enough? Or, there has to be a reason why. And can we fix it versus disposing? Do you view things similar to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And in some cases there is no fixing, and in other cases there are,
Right.
right? And it goes back to that willingness and knowledge. If you have someone that's hustling, like, hey, I'm willing to learn everything I can here, and you could just see their work ethic, and they're working late in some cases, and they're just putting in that extra time to get their knowledge up to a certain level. There's no way that person, there's no way that I would look at that person and say this person's not going to make it. Now there's certain skills, right? If you're an
Yeah.
engineer, let's say, if you keep shipping code that's breaking and taking down our websites, that's one thing.
Right.
But if you're in account management or sales or analytics and you just have more to learn, that's a huge opportunity. The harder issue that I found is that we've had many people in our company that did really good. I mean, when you're smaller, right, everyone kind of reported to me, right? And then as you grow, that can't be the case. So what
Right.
was harder is once we hit this threshold is to tell my key team members that reported to me, hey, you're going to report to someone else now. And I looked at that and I said, okay, well, how do I communicate that properly without making them feel they're unworthy or
Right.
it's a demotion? And really, what it comes down to is what helped those people get us to a certain place. It's a different skill set to take us to that next place,
Right.
and and it was clear that we were bringing in people with much more expertise. It wasn't like we were bringing in a peer to those folks.
Right.
So, and then explaining to them to say, hey, take this as an opportunity to learn, from the chief operating officer about how they do one-on-ones, how they do skip levels, how they conduct themselves, how they do financial reviews, how they're looking at the math in different ways, right? Things that I can't possibly teach you because I can't be 10 places at once.
Right.
And it was hard to digest initially, but the outcomes of that have been great. And kudos to those team members that trusted me to say, you know what, I will do this, because at the end of the day, they realized, hey, these people are coming in with a different skill set than I had.
Well, I think you touched on two things, and again, love to point this out. So I don't want, we get caught up sometimes when we're talking, and we I don't want to rush over a couple things. You said two things. One is I personally think the job of any leader who's worth their salt is to theoretically train themselves out of a job, right? So that they could go do more things, right? So and to be aware of enough to say, you, Joe, don't have that skill yet. I can't teach. I need somebody here to plug and play. And the goal would be for you to learn from them. And what I liked hearing about you, that situation right there, is they trusted you enough. You had given them enough, through your time with them, invested enough with them that they trusted you. Again, it's sometimes you may not like it, but you're believing that it will. But you're also, again, to your point, is you didn't bring someone who is a peer, who someone goes, wait a minute, I know as much as this person. You brought someone else with more experience. and gave them a reason why. And I think so that's the key. One is training yourself out, but the fact that you took time to explain the reasoning behind it and what's in it for them, I think that's another key component to one, your success, but other people who've run successful businesses is this investment of time, but you're valued enough that I should explain to you my reasoning and what's in it. I think that, again, sometimes it's just I'm the boss, I got a million things going on, but you've always been that way. So have you always, again, just pivot here for a minute, if you look back through your life, I do this exercise with people sometime and say, if you looked at all of your jobs, there's probably a common thread. Forget your title, forget where you work, just what you've done, all the different jobs, and there's probably a thread through all of them. Would you say that whether you were the title of the leader or given a title, or were you always someone that people gravitated towards to learn from or get advice from or feel comfortable? I hope I'm explaining myself correctly, but if you look back
Yeah,
at that, was
yeah.
there a thread there?
For the most part, yes. So when I was in high school, I was nominated for this leadership camp, and that was a pivotal moment because I'm like, how do they recognize me for this? When one of two kids at Mount Carmel High School in Chicago were nominated for this, and that was just a really cool moment. And I'm like, wow, I got that recognition. I mean, even going back to grade school, I think I got something as well. But then it's weird. There's moments when you're kind of in a position and you're not kind of recognized as a leader, at least initially, until you prove yourself. An example of that was working on the assembly line, right? I have very humble beginnings, and yeah, and you know this, but
Right.
the audience may not. It wasn't like I worked there for a summer. I worked there for 6 years, building cars while reading textbooks while working on the line. And when I first started there, it was years before people would even acknowledge the fact that I had leadership skills because
Right.
I was a robot. I was placed in this position, and I think that was for me the most frustrating thing. But what it clicked to me is like, okay, I have two chances here. I could sit here and whine about it, and I could wait till my 30 years of retirement as a UAW employee with decent benefits and a nice pension, or I could do something about it. And that's why I was like, okay, I'll go to school. And then it's like, okay, when am I going to have time to read my textbooks and do my homework? Well, in between building cars. so
Right.
and then I think people saw that, and then they're like, oh shit, you're in school. Well, a lot of people started school there,
Right.
but I actually finished school, and then they're like, oh, okay, cool. And then I got another job in the marketing and sales division. So it's kind of like sometimes people look at you and may not think you're a leader, but you have to prove it through your actions
Right.
if they don't. And then all of a sudden you are in a position of being a leader because you've promoted yourself to become one.
Right. Right. I like that. And it was because when I've thought about it for myself, every job that I've had, either, from delivering papers, working in restaurants, in the kitchen, waiting tables, doing everything, it always seemed that somebody would come to me and say, can you help me figure it out? Whether I had the title or not, it just, I think good leaders also are approachable. And I think you've always been someone who's been approachable and generous. And as I said, what just watching you maneuver through your company at conferences, you're, I can honestly say you're incredibly smart. Not just technical smart from that, but just human interaction, how you judge people. But you never come across as someone who is like, I'm super smart. Now, if we were debating something technical, we were like, okay, no, I understand, I know this. But I think that's also how your company is. It doesn't come out banging its chest. It's very confident. It's very caring. And as I said, when I've come into that culture, into that building multiple times, there is that energy, but it is an energy of you and actually those, your core that surrounds you. And either it's just developed over time because of that, it's still continuing to be your leadership through that. It's pretty amazing. And even past the acquisition, where, somebody might say, hey, I've made it. The funny thing is, I don't think you still think you've made it. whatever made it means. You know what I'm saying? Like you're still
Yeah.
going, I think you're working just as harder as you've always, just because you like it. And I think, do you think that's really ultimately the key of successful leaders? Is this, there's always either something else to do, learn, or challenge. Do you have to constantly throw challenges in front of yourself to keep yourself motivated?
Well, I have plenty of challenges right now, and
Yeah,
being fortunate to be part of Cars, there's those challenges as well. Of like now I have the ability to influence the direction of a public company and Cars.com and the look and feel of something that gets 25 million visitors, and they're looking at me saying, "Hey, what are your ideas there?" So that's really exciting for me. But backing up a second, thank you for those compliments. I really mean it. It means a ton. I think I I'm thinking I come across like that because I came from humble beginnings and because I worked at an assembly plant, and I sit there and I'm fortunate enough, or I feel fortunate that I don't have to go back walking down that tunnel to that assembly line. I think about that many times, and
right.
there's many moments at that plant where I was like, wow, I'm so glad I'm not there. Those people there work very, very hard, but it just wasn't for me. And I'm very grateful, and I feel like I'm very lucky to be in the position I am. And hopefully, I come across like that as appreciative because I am. But I think when it comes down to it, it really comes down to purpose. And when I created DI, I felt like the intentions were pure, and they still are, but it's the purpose that really drives and that's really driven me. And if you look at the successful companies out there, it's not about, hey, let's go make a quick buck and let's sell our organization. Sure, that could happen, and there's plenty of
Sure.
stories where that does happen. But when you look at the ones that really succeed, I really think it comes down to the initial purpose of that founder or founding people, and we've all kind of had that, and that's why those tenets are really important to us to say, okay, now that we've had some we've got to the top of a mountain, right? Now we got to give back. Now we got to give to our community through philanthropy, give back to our clients, and then build something else. But to also touch on your other point, success. It's funny because I when we were growing the business, there's a lot of signs of achievement, whether that be growing clients, getting OEMs, getting
Hmm.
a higher employee count, and people were like, "Man, you're so successful," and I was like, "Do not call me that at all," because, and this is before we got acquired. And I said, "Listen, we were a bootstrap company. We didn't have capital, and every day I was stressed about cash flow. And if I made certain mistakes, all of that could have went to the wayside very, very quickly." And
Hmm.
it's kind of like Doug Collins said this once at Refuel, and he said, "Trust is gained in drops but lost in buckets." And I think your company is the same in the
Yeah.
sense that like you're gaining clients, you're gaining employee confidence, you're developing products, and it's really in drops, right? But you can make a few mistakes, dumb mistakes, and it's lost in buckets. And I look back at those moments, and I'm like, it's I'm forever grateful for that opportunity that we had. And I always said, say I'm successful when I sell the company, and that's okay because that's a defining moment. And then guess what? I sold it, and I don't feel like that.
Right.
To your point, I don't at all. It's
Yep.
bizarre, and it might be mind-boggling, but I don't. I feel like there's more out there, and now I have something to prove, and I like to win. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you used a couple analogies. It is getting to the top of the mountain, and then all of a sudden you see there's another mountain, right?
Yep.
Or for you, I just know the fact that, and I'm just going to make a judgment here of you just someone gave you a bigger toolbox to play with, right? And that's like, oh, I got the big Lego now. Like I got the 8,000 piece Lego. I used to, I thought I was good when I had a couple hundred piece, and now it's, you have that. But it is that sense of humility of I really hear it and I see you move it. It's not that you always think of yourself as a bootstrap, but you're very conscious of those decisions and whether you're sitting at the table with the cars team, your team, frontline. There is that sense of purpose. There's a sense of focus and commitment to we still have things to do. And it was funny. I was watching a TV show the other day and someone said, "When are you successful?" And they say, "Whenever you decide the game's over." Right? But for a lot of people, there's another game to be played, or I want to keep going, or I feel that I have. And I think it's for you, at least I see it. And we've had side conversations. Like you said, you've gone into philanthropy, your Refuel conference, and giving back. It's this. There's always something else to do and share and learn and give. And I think that's exciting because it's more about what's Joe Chura going to do over the next 20 years. That to me is exciting versus Joe, sold his company and he's done. That would almost be disappointing if Joe
Mm.
retired to a beach and just was like, okay, I checked out. And I was like, dang, well, all right, whatever, kudos. But I am excited about seeing what you do because of all the things that you have in front of you, opportunities in front of you. Um, is there anything that, again, without sharing anything, what's the thing that's, because we're going to wrap up in a couple seconds, what's the thing outside of the business? What's the big thing that makes Joe happy? I mean, family's one thing, but again, all that, like what makes Joe like, that's good, that's good.
I got to be honest. I'm trying to figure that out now, and it's tough because happiness is. I thought when you get to the end of this one rainbow, I'd be happier. But what I found is it's the journey that
Right.
really had made me happy, and it's that every day of trying and facing adversity and then winning. And I think from when I look at the business side, it's about winning, and I think there's a huge connected platform opportunity that is in front of us, and we built the pieces for that. Now it's time to bridge them together. But outside of that, you know, I I keep going back to Refuel as like kind of the centroid of my purpose in the sense that I can create something, and now I have a big enough platform that people can attend and listen to great speakers and be motivated and inspired and take steps to change their life.
So just for those who
And
don't understand, Joe
yeah,
created a conference. So Ted, just give the audience a little 30-second on what Refuel is.
yeah. So Refuel stemmed from a conference I went to, saw a great speaker, Cedric King, inspired me to run the Chicago Marathon in 2015. As we were growing the business, I said, "Wow, wouldn't it be great to get to send my team to go see a speaker like him?" And obviously couldn't do it at that time. It wasn't economical. I had a few hundred employees, so I said, "Why don't I bring the speakers to them?" So I rented out a local church. It seats a little over 1,000 people. I don't only had 300 employees at the time, which is a lot. I'm not saying only as if
Right.
it's small,
Yeah.
but what that meant is there was capacity for 700 extra people to sit and listen to these speakers. So I said, "Oh, what if I sell tickets to this conference and I donate 100% of those proceeds to charity?" So it's a huge win-win. So I partnered with our vendors, some local businesses, and they help sponsor it, which helps me cover the cost of folks there. And then the ticket sales, I donate to a local charity, Loaves and Fishes. And it's just this winning formula. So my team gets a lot out of it. The local community gets a lot out of it. The vendors feel like they're doing something good as well, which they are. Speakers are there and they're really inspired. So I had people like David Goggins.
Hmm.
This year I have Tony Hawk lined up,
Right.
and just people that have inspired me in my life in certain ways, and some odd ways, and some ways where I heard them speak or follow their podcasts, and it really has people that have attended it. It's gave them in some cases doses of inspiration or fuel to change their lives, and
That's great.
that fuels me. The fact that like we would never have been here if we didn't, you know, gradually take these steps and get to a place where now this is a platform. So when I come back to my purpose in life, now I'm not saying that's it, Glenn, but I feel like there's something there and I need to explore it more.
Good, 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 good. All right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been phenomenal. And as I say to everybody who listens, there's so much. Go back and listen again. We're going to take the audio and put it on a podcast. But Joe, I just appreciate your time. But I ask everybody who so far, my few guests that have sat with me here, and I will continue to ask them, either it was given to you, a piece of advice that was given to you that was really impactful, or if one of your, we talked about it, some new person you just promoted to lead a team, they have a team, and they sit with you and they say, Joe, what's one thing that you would, piece of advice or something I should focus on in the beginning of this journey? What would be that key or topic or thought that you would share with that new leader?
So I would say that I have a couple. It's not just one. I'll go quick. One, there's no sacred cows in things. So if you are used to doing something a certain way, or you feel like the company does something a certain way, like you are empowered to change it. Like there's no sacred cows in anything. Growth requires change. Secondly, is changing your mindset. So a few times when I talk to people, even this morning, the first question is, "Hey, how are you doing?" And the answer is, I've been busy, right? Everyone's busy. So changing your mindset from busy to active. So in my calendar, when I do time blocking, I'll put active. I won't put busy there because we're all doing active things, right?
Right.
And everyone's busy, and there's always a reason not to do something. I
Mhm.
found that whether it's working out, eating right, there's always a reason. And then the last thing is just really looking at that incremental change, that getting 1% better every day, and whether that's being a better manager, being a better developer, being a better leader in whatever capacity. It's this incremental change, like we had talked about, Glenn. It's like gaining it in drops and not thinking it's going to come in buckets, and just knowing that over time that adds up, and you clearly see that in everything in life, whether it's building muscle, if it's
Mhm.
eating right. It doesn't happen overnight. Nothing great is easy.
Right.
So just stick with it, and great things will happen.
Great. That is those are phenomenal, phenomenal pieces of advice. So, thank you, Joe. Like I said, Joe, this has been. I've watched you. I've become friends with you, and I'm just so happy for you and your success, and happy for your team because you've surrounded yourself with some really, really great people. I've got to know a lot of them as well, and I couldn't be happier for you. And as I said, honestly, I'm excited for what you will be doing, company business wise, but actually I'm more excited in a lot of ways, like you said, figuring out whatever that passion is of yours or what that goal is, because I think you've always had an impact. And so whatever that impact's going to be, I think it's going to benefit a lot of people. And the same thing, those little drips, I don't think you know what the bucket is yet, but when you figure out the bucket, there's going to be a lot for people to drink out of. And I think that's a really, really good thing. So I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate you coming on here and helping out. And so tell people just briefly, again, I know you're active a bit on social to share all of this out. How can they find you?
Facebook, Joe Chura, Twitter, at Joe Chura. My email is jchura@dealerinspire.com. LinkedIn, just, I don't know what the URL is there, but
You can find
feel
you.
free to look me up there.
And
Yeah.
again,
But
yeah.
but
And
but
go ahead.
Glenn, I want to say one thing. I truly, to you and your brother, you guys are have been great to me and to Dealer Inspire since the beginning, when no one even knew who we were, and I'll never forget that. And it's just amazing to talk to you. This many years later, it feels like yesterday in some ways, and in other ways, it feels like more than a decade ago. But it was the moment at AWA that really, I mean, just put this smile on our face, and gave us the what we needed to light that fire to do what we've done. And truly, I mean that. Like, that was such a great moment. And I have to reflect back at one thing. It was holding that AWA for the first time. And it meant so much to us because no one really knew who we were. We had this idea, we had the right purpose. We had launched digital marketing And that's kind of what people knew, if they knew us at all. But
Right.
that was such a great moment. And to talk to you today and just to reflect back on those memories means a ton to me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I still, honestly, I remember the day Brian came into my office and says, "You got to come see this. You just got to see what I just saw." I said, "All right, man, let's go. Let's roll." So again, I thank you. So everybody, again, I appreciate it. So again, I hope you found value. Again, please follow Joe. Great guy, shares a lot. As always, if you found value, just click the subscribe button, notifications. I post new videos out every Tuesday, Thursday. Tuesdays one-on-one with me. Thursdays are going to be interviews with friends like Joe. As always, I hope you found value. Please share it out with your network. I know there's a lot of people out there who could use this type of feedback because there's not a lot of it out there, and that's the goal here. So as I wrap up everything here, every single episode that we do, we close out with saying you're in charge, but now Joe and I have given you a few more tools to help you become more successful. So thank you so much and have a great day. Take care, Joe. Be well.
Thanks, Glenn. Take care, my friend.